What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Tide Talk. It's Wednesday, September 4th, and we're back in the away end to preview RIFC's upcoming match in Pittsburgh. So cozy up, grab a bear. Let's dive into this one. Just a reminder, each episode is available on YouTube, and if you're watching now, please take a second to click that like button on this video and subscribe to our podcast. You can also find us on your favorite podcast applications like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you listen on one of those, we'd really appreciate it if you took a minute to leave us a 5-star rating and a short review, as it helps more people find our podcast. If you're not already using the RIFC Club Collector app, click the link in this episode description. Get on that site. Go into the code Tide Talk, all one word, to get a free pack added to your collection. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm joined by my bald-headed brethren, Ryan. What's up, Mr. Healy? How are you today?
What's up, friend? How we doing?
Very good, very good. We've also got Mike from the Mon Goals podcast, and we're doing a double session right now. You don't know it because Mike just recorded us on the Mon Goals pod, so you'll have to go out and see the other side of this preview and get the full story, get the full 360. Mike, how's everything going, my man?
I'm good. I'm disappointed you guys didn't let me know about the drinks. I would have had one prepared and ready to crack with you, and yeah, here we are. So, oh well.
It's all right. It's all good. So let's dive into this one. We talked about on your show. We love doing the away end. We love connecting with other supporters and kind of learning about supporter culture across the USL Championship, as this is a new venture for our new club, Rhode Island FC. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, how you got started, how you got into it, and what you do, where you are, and how people can find you.
So the story is sort of a long one. So we're heading into our 10th season of doing Mon Goals, which is kind of crazy. It was my brother and I. My brother lives in Tennessee, and we said we should do something that forces us to talk to each other once a week. And we both like soccer, and we were like, well, let's follow the hounds and we'll just talk about soccer. Literally, we went to a game together, and we found ourselves in a section sitting around a bunch of old guys and like just BSing with the old guys about like the play on the field at the time. And at the time, the hounds were awful. But we were like, that was a lot of fun. We should do this. And just quickly, we went from the two of us to now we basically have a crew of 6 people who are all contributing and sharing ideas. And now we roll out anywhere from 3 to 6 episodes a week, covering things like fans' reactions in the stadium after the game, to interviews with players or coaches, to shows like talking to you guys to sort of get the details on the team that's coming up. So it's really just a whole lot of fun. You can find us over on YouTube or really anywhere where you get your podcast. Just love talking soccer, talking about the hounds, talking to different communities and learning about what you guys got going on.
I love that because I started RIFC Nation as a one-man band. We always joke about it. Ryan wrote me paragraphs on Reddit. I was like, dude, come on the podcast. Let's talk about it together. And now we have a lot of contributors and cranking out blogs and pods and everything. It's just so much fun. There's a lot to talk about throughout the course of a very long USL championship season. So the more people that get involved, it's always great.
For sure. We've always said that if we could make sort of the show almost like a water cooler where people can just sort of hang out and share their thoughts, then fantastic. So the more people that we can get involved in more viewpoints and conversations, the more fun it's going to be. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely love that. So, Mike, turning from kind of your world to a little bit more on the pitch here. So looking at the Hound season so far, you guys sit in 9th place in the East on 32 points. You are 2 points off of that last playoff spot there, but you are unbeaten in your last 9, including 5 of the past 7 have been draws. So number 1, are you coming for our Draw Kings title? And number 2, what have you made of this season so far for the Hounds?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the season so far has not been great. So ever since Bob Lilly came in, which I think was 6 years ago now, the Hounds have never missed the playoffs. So we've been spoiled since he came in. Prior to that, I think we made the playoffs once in the time that we were doing the show. And so Bob came in, we're like, this is fantastic. So this is new territory for us to be this late in the season and not be in a playoff position. So it doesn't feel great. The reason why is a couple fold. So one, you guys are welcome. You took Albertiqua from us. And so, when you lose the MVP of the league, that's difficult. But then in addition to that, we lost the defensive player of the year in the league, Albert Ordonez, to Louisville. And so in our mind, we're like, Bob Lilly chops and changes every single year. It's not a big deal. He'll find replacements. Hasn't been the case as much this season, which is ironic because this season is actually in terms of keeping players from year to year, he's kept the most players this season than any other season that he's coached. And so we're like, okay, we'll have some continuity. It just hasn't been the right continuity. So we've had a really solid midfield, but you mentioned we're currently on a 9-game unbeaten streak, but a lot of those are ties. And we did have a streak this season where we went 8 games and only scored 1 goal over that 8-game stretch, which is a massive reason why we're kind of in the position that we're in right now.
Yeah.
So I think that especially off of the season last year where we won the Players' Shield, so we basically had the highest points total of any team in the league. We were like, this is even if we have a little bit of a slip, it'll still be okay. And this has just been a much bigger slip than a lot of Hounds fans were sort of prepared for. So we're starting to find our stride a little bit again. We're starting to get some goals. It's going to take a bit of a push. We've always said that, especially when you get to the playoffs, it's never the team that has the best record that does the best in the playoff. It's the team that is hottest at that moment. So our only hope, fingers crossed, you can barely see my fingers crossed, is that if the Hounds do push their way in, it's going to require them to basically have to be hot and then stay hot. And hopefully they can ride that wave a little bit if they do make it into the playoffs. So.
Yeah, so just one thing to kind of touch back on that you mentioned. So you mentioned Bob Lilly's been there for about 6 years now. And we seem to have almost like a similar conversation with Kaler from the Hammering Down pod about Birmingham Legion. They've had a really long-term coach. And it just seems like this year the magic dust has kind of run out on what they've traditionally done. Do you think there's anything there with like Bob Lilly? I don't know, has he lost the locker room? Like anything like that? Or do you think it's just maybe didn't bring in the right players in the offseason and just kind of struggling to adapt there?
Oh, man. How much time do we have? Listen, no, it feels like every season we get to a point where people start saying like Bob Lilly's lost it. Like it's time for him to go. And, last year he won Coach of the Year. I think, anytime you sort of take a team to be the Players' Shields, he ends up being Coach of the Year. Yep. I think what happened this year was he maybe misvalued sort of what we have. We relied a lot on Deekwa to get goals last year. And I think that there was an assumption that, well, we can just replace that with some other strikers. And in his system, Deekwa is a very special player and played a very special role. And trying to find someone else to fit that Deekwa role, it's not as simple as just like plugging and changing.
Yep.
And so I think that's probably the biggest problem. We still see signs of him going into games and tactically outmaneuvering other coaches and doing things like that. It feels like, especially on that streak where we went 8 games and only scored 1 goal, the players were in their own heads. And that's very difficult to, I had talked to players and had a lot of off the record conversations, and you could tell they're just like, it's so tough and we're so stressed about this. And it's things like that have really caused us to get derailed a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you say that because before this, I was kind of looking into some of the data around you guys, and your like expected points and expected goal differential is outrageously better than like what you've actually produced on the pitch. So it is clearly like a team who's like not playing nearly as bad as their record or their standing shows for it, which is another reason why, spoiler alert for when you listen to the other podcast, of my prediction of why I'm a little nervous about this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's really difficult for us as fans to predict how this team's going to do because the potential is there. We've seen the potential is there. I mean, they beat Oakland 5-0. And it's like, okay, we know you can score. This is great. But then you show up and you might struggle to score. So again, I'm hoping that now that their backs are to the walls. And we saw a game, they played Indy this past week. They went down to 10 men 4 minutes in. They scored and were up 1-0 and ended up drawing on the absolute last kick of the game where they shouldn't have even been playing at that moment. There was 4 minutes of stoppage time and the ref just kept adding time to the point that the game should have been over. And so it was heartbreaking, but our hope is that the team sort of learns from that and pushes forward and takes it into, hopefully you guys this weekend, but we'll see.
So a segment that we do here on Tide Talk is called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. Mike, if you could provide us with a good, a bad, and an ugly moment from the Pittsburgh Riverhounds season so far.
Sure. I probably touched on a few already. Let me start with ugly. So the ugly was really that 8-game stretch where we only got 1 goal. I think everybody was sort of questioning what's happening. Like, we really slid down the table at that point. That was the first time Bob was kind of in a non-playoff position. So you had a lot of fans questioning, like, what does the team do? Like, do you keep them if they don't make the playoffs? This is a team that, we're currently in a stadium that holds 5,000 people. And we know that over the next 3 years, we're expanding to 15,000. So like, you can't have a team that's starting to go backwards when you need to be putting butts in the seats to fill out a new stadium. So that was the ugly, was really that 8-game stretch. I'll say the good was probably coming out of that, where Oakland came to Pittsburgh. Oakland was red hot at that point. They were like team of the week in USL, and we beat them 5-0. So at that point, the team was celebrating like we had just made the playoffs. Everyone knew that wasn't the case, but that felt really, really good. The bad, I would just say the lack of scoring in general. It's been really tough to come by. Our strikers, we're not really relying on our strikers as much to score. It's more or less having to come from elsewhere. And Matt, I know that you sort of like goals from midfielders. And so, we've been getting a few more of those, but it still is not at the level that it should be. So I'll say the other good thing, the other positive, is that defensively we've gotten back and been really sound. We're, I think, third in the league in shutouts, and I think we're tied for second in goals allowed. So even though the goals haven't been going in on the other side, we've been keeping them out of our net, which has allowed us to sort of keep things level and give us a shot at making a run at the playoffs. Yeah.
That's the thing I always think of, is like, when you have a defense like that, you at least you have a shot at every game, and you just need someone up there just tap the ball in the net on the other end. But like, you're always giving yourself a chance, which is always great.
Speaking of tapping the ball in the net, our guy Andrew Quadros in the chat wants to know, can you describe the system that made Dequa so special while in Pittsburgh? Asking for a friend, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, Dequa functioned much better for us as a poacher. There were a lot of times that he would almost create something out of nothing. And so Lily very much has been a defense first coach. So everything starts from the back. You defend as a team, you attack as a team. And it always just seemed like Dequa was sort of one step ahead of the rest of the team in terms of pushing forward. And so whether we could spring him to get one-on-ones, or, he could do some sort of link up play with the midfield where we get a quick ball out to him from the back. He could dish off and then turn and run. A lot of the goals that he got, a lot of the 20 goals that he got last season were created kind of on his own, as opposed to being like a whole team thing. And yeah, that was one of those things that talking to the team, they were saying like, yeah, we're not getting goals, but as a team, we're getting in much better positions than just leaving Dequa hanging. Sure. He seemed to do well hanging. So yeah.
One thing you also mentioned while we were on your episode was how impressed you were with the fact that we got Marky Barra too. So, or maybe more impressed or more concerned of losing Marky Barra compared to Chico. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, for sure. So Lily always likes to have a very sound midfield, and Marky Barra was someone that came in as a new player. I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago. And he impressed right away. And one of the things that he started to develop was sort of this link up play and this ability to break lines with passes. And so my concern, getting back to your point of like what kind of system makes Dequa thrive, was that if Dequa wasn't in the right system, or he didn't have the right people feeding him the types of balls that he needs in order to be potent, then he wouldn't thrive in the way that he did in Pittsburgh. And so my thought was that what made you guys so intelligent was you didn't just get Dequa, you also got him somebody that has played with him and knows the type of balls that he needs in order to be successful. Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I thought it was interesting that you guys got Marky Barra as well.
I think it also spoke volumes with Ibarra joining, and when Koke was out via injury or red card suspension earlier in the season, it was Marky Barra that was wearing the armband for this team. So, I think Kano views him as a leader in this team. And, we talked about on your podcast how Kano seems to bring in players that either he's had personal experience with or that other players have. So he likes that continuity. So, interested to hear your thoughts on that and appreciate that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we love Mark. He was always around the team. He was sort of a local-ish guy. We miss him. So
awesome. So Mike, another one of our ever present segments on the show. We do RIFC 3 after the match. So fans write in their 3-word review of the match that just happened. Could you let us know your 3-word review of the Pittsburgh season so far?
Ooh, okay. Can I give an explanation as to what the words mean?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right. So first one, I'll say goals, and that's more or less lack of, because that's really been the defining factor for this team so far this season. And we just went through all of that. I will say defense, because that has been the thing that has sort of kept us where we are. And then the other one will be transition, because I think that we're very used to sort of each season being a bit of a microcosm, and you sort of live out the season, and then we get to the end of the season and we always lose a bunch of players. And I think that everyone was just prepared for that to happen again this season, and the Hounds would be fine. And we're learning that maybe that's not the case. And I'm hoping that, front office, Bob Lilly, are also understanding that there's only so much transition you can go through and sort of maintain the level that you were at. And so I think from a fan perspective, this being a bit of a transitional year, but also as a team, understanding you can only lose so much, and you really have to, start putting other pieces back in place to pick up that what you lost.
Right on. Talk us through the typical game day, match day atmosphere at Pittsburgh. Your stadium is beautiful to watch on TV. I was originally hoping to go to this one, but my 3-year-old starts like Little Strikers for the first time this weekend. That was the final straw that my wife was like, nah, you got to stay home for this one. I was all set to make the trip. I love watching you guys on TV. The stadium just looks awesome. But talk us through the match day experience, from tailgate to the in-game environment in the stadium and everything that is a Pittsburgh Riverhounds match.
For sure. So the Hounds play at Highmark Stadium, which is literally situated right alongside the Monongahela River, which is where our show name comes from. Mon Goals was, especially earlier in the Hounds' history, lots of balls were getting kicked into the river, so we started to call them Mon Goals. But it's, as I mentioned, it's a 5,000 seat stadium. I think we've sold out almost every game this season, which makes for an amazing atmosphere. Part of the reason why, like I said, we're expanding. But it's so much fun. I mean, literally, I think the gates typically open around noon, and the parking lot is typically packed by 12:30. And it's you got every different tailgate you can imagine. The supporters group is called the Steel Army. So the Steel Army has their own tailgate, but there's always academy families that are tailgating. So you tailgate all day. You guys mentioned, I think on my show, about getting people into the stadium early. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes there'll be dollar beers to get people into the door before the game starts. And so people get in there and they have a good time. The supporters always have a march into the stadium as well. And so you always pick up fans and families on their way in too. And then once you're inside, right behind the one goal, which you guys will see on camera, is where the Steel Army sits. It's typically packed. There's banners and flags and smoke and drums, and it's everything that you would expect from a raucous supporter section. And we enjoy the game, and then post game they let everybody onto the field to meet the players and just run around and have some fun. And we typically will try to grab some of the fans and get their reactions of being there. And it's one of those things where like I said, you go, and especially if you sit in the supporter section, you're hooked. They need to just grow the supporter section in particular, because you have more people that will get tickets for the grandstand. Sure. And then they see all the fun we're having in the supporter section, and they just come over and stand with us. So
I have a very similar Rhode Island story. My son and I were sitting across the field, saw the drums, all that. He wanted to move, wanted to get close to it, and now we're the section over because it was like the closest thing. But we're buying our season tickets for next week, and my son's already like, I want to be right in with the drums. So like we're going full supporter section.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Start them early, man. Yeah.
So I'm raising a hooligan. Ryan knows. Ryan listens to him yell at every match. It's insane. Unfortunately, it translated at his practice this week, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, oh God, this is terrible." But we had a pretty interesting or cool question from Ewan in the chat. He says, "Hey Mike, do you have an idea of how they are going to expand the stadium?" So based on what you've said, I assume it's an on-site expansion.
Yeah, so a few years ago, the team owner Tuffy actually bought all of the land that the stadium is on. So the team now owns all of the land.
You didn't
It's
guys
interesting.
didn't find any like dead bodies or anything like Indy did?
Oh
Like
my
when
God.
No, thankfully. Well, they haven't dug up anything in
All right.
years. The stadium was kind of, they owned the stadium. They didn't own the land under it. He has now purchased the land under it. No, it's interesting. The way that fans actually found out about it was they saw like the state filing that they were requesting permits to grow the stadium. And
I
so
love
since
investigative fan nonsense
right?
like
Yeah,
that. I love that.
exactly. Since then, I've talked with the team president and I've said, what's going on? And he's like, actually, we were just requesting permission. We have like rough ideas, but it's interesting because literally the one side of the stadium basically butts right up next to train tracks, which then butts right up to the river. So they can't go that way. There's a road right behind the stadium and then there's parking lots on either side. So it sounds like one of the things they could do is just basically increase the amount of stands on one end. They talked about building stands on the other end over top of sort of what's right now, just sort of like corporate seating. Beyond that, we're just as curious as to how this is all going to happen. And so I keep asking the team, like, are you ready to talk about it? Are you ready to talk about it? And so I'm sure that as soon as they have something, I'll have the president on our show and we'll be sharing the details of how this is all going to go down. Because a lot of it, we have no clue how this is going to work out.
And our friend Evan, aka Megatron, in the chat wants to know: will the trains be running during the match?
Absolutely, man. Come on now. Like you'll see probably, I think the average is anywhere 2 to 3 that you'll see during the game, and most of the time they'll pull the whistle. If you watch, there's also it's called the Gateway Clipper Fleet. There are these boats that people go on. They're multi-tiered, and you can have dinner and whatever. And they do tours up and down the river. You'll see those floating up and down the river too. Yeah, it's quite the experience watching and being at a Hounds game.
Well, Mike, has there been any like ill-timed whistles from the train that's thrown off a player in front of goal, and that could be maybe an explanation for some of the goal issues this year?
I don't know specifically in that case. Someone did donate an actual train whistle to the Steel Army, like cool. With an air canister. So like if they blow it, then we'll blow it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I like
That's awesome. Awesome. So yeah, as we turn to this match and kind of get our fans more familiar with Pittsburgh, who are 3 players to watch on Saturday?
So we mentioned that Pat Hogan won't be in because of the red card that he picked up in Indy. Pat Hogan, sort of one of our big center backs. I would say in that case, the other center back you should watch is Sean Suber. He's a great ball playing center back. We've said that I called him out in one of our games early this season, and I was like, he was absolutely awful. Like his passes were to nobody. And then like 2 weeks later, I had him on the show, and I was like, I'm sorry, dude. Like you did so much better. Like this was great, and he has progressed so much since he got here. I think part of it is that for whatever reason, Lily's system. They move and they change shape and they adjust so much during the game that sometimes it just takes a little bit more time for people to pick up. Totally. But he has picked it up and he's been amazing ever since then. So Sean Subert, center back, is a good one. I will probably say the other 2 players are going to be midfielders. So Danny Griffin and Robbie Mertz. Danny Griffin has been sort of our Iron Man for the past 4 years now. He's basically played every game that the Hounds have been in, except there was a short stint where he went and played in MLS 2 for like half a season, and then he came back with us. He's now our captain. We say that he's our best holding midfielder that isn't a holding midfielder. So he's literally, he can play so many different positions on the field, and he's the best holding midfielder we have, and Lily likes to play him there. But we've been begging to cut him loose as more of a number 10 because when he gets forward, he's so potent. He scored in the Indy game, and he's just all over the place. And then the other midfielder. Would you call him
your Roy Kent?
Yes, he is our Roy Kent. Yes.
All right.
And then the other guy is Robbie Mertz. Robbie Mertz is a local Pittsburgh kid. And he's been with the team for a few years now as well. And between him and Griffin, especially last week when we went down to 10 men, they completely ran the show in the midfield. They were sort of all over the place, covering lots of ground. Almost everything flows through those guys. So those are the 2 guys to watch out for. I'd tell you a forward, but as we talked about, like goals have been hard to come by. So there might be someone that pops up, but really Suber, Griffin, and Mertz are going to be the three to watch. They'll provide the most entertainment for you guys.
Our guy Matt Hand says in the chat that Mertz sounds a little bit like our Clay Holstead, as far as being here, being there, being everywhere.
Yeah.
So next up, and we had our guy Nate who just joined the chat. Always good seeing our guy Nate Ski in here. This is always his question, so glad he's here to hear it. But if there's any super sub that can come in, or super subs, obviously formational or starting 11 dependent, but any subs who can really kind of come in and impact the game in later stages for the Hounds.
Yeah, I'll give you two names. One is Kenny Forbes. So Kenny Forbes is the all-time assist leader in the USL. He's basically played with Bob Lilly almost his entire life. He was with him in Rochester, and then when Rochester folded and Lilly came to Pittsburgh, Kenny came with him. And Kenny's been our captain all the way up until this season. I think Kenny is 33 or 34 now. So Lilly actually joked at the beginning of the season that they're going to start calling him Coach Kenny, and he was just going to progress into being a coach. When I talked to Kenny, he was like, not yet. Let me finish the season. I'm not ready to hang him up yet. But most recently, they've been starting Kenny on the bench, and then he comes off in midfield. Sometimes he'll play almost a little bit further forward, midfield attacking kind of thing. So he can still deliver a good ball. In terms of knowing where the game is spatially, mentally, he's still there. It's just he can't maintain the speed for a full 90 minutes. So he can come in and do a job. And then Bradley Sample is another midfielder who will come in. You'll notice him because he has the most fabulous mullet that you will ever see. Yeah, just wait. As soon as he gets up, you'll be like, oh, that's him. Amazing.
I'm a little nervous. I feel like that gives you extra super sub points. Like a guy with a mullet's a good super sub. Yeah.
Yeah. This is his first year out of college, but he's been really, really good. One of the things that Lilly's really good at is identifying midfielders out of college. And so we have a lot of young guys that are in there, but Sample's
that makes
been
sense
able
with
to come
Ibarra,
in.
right? He came right out of college for you guys.
Exactly. And so he comes in, he's able to break up plays. He's able to make a good cutting pass. He has had some rifles of shots, but he hasn't had any go in yet. So I was joking with him, like, when's it going to happen, man? And he's just like, I don't know. So maybe it'll be this game. Maybe it won't be. We'll see. But yeah, Sample is a baller. That is true.
All right, so perfect. So as we tune our attention to the match, so start getting your score predictions in the chat, everybody. Matt, what would you say, Mike, what would you say the keys of the game are here for Pittsburgh to keep all 3 points there? And then vice versa, if you were to lose, how would that go?
They're kind of tied. I think we just have to score. It's the case where I think defensively, Lilly's not going to want to give up a goal at home. Last season, we sort of called Highmark Stadium Fort Highmark because we lost, I think, one game all season at home. And I think we only had one or two draws. We had the rest wins. And so they want to get back to that. Not scoring makes it very difficult to win all of your games at home. But I think if we can get a goal, hopefully two, then that's just going to be the key for the Hounds. I think otherwise, in terms of shutting things down, clogging up the midfield, we talked a little bit about the whole possession thing, how we don't want to have possession, you don't want to have possession. So if we can score, I think we'll be able to do enough to lock things down at the back to get the win.
Before I kick it to the chat and all of you guys too, and get score predictions. So if you don't already have your score prediction, make sure you throw it in the chat. Just a reminder, Tide Talk will be live at Providence Brewing ahead of this one. I know Ryan's drinking a Providence Pilsner right now. Our good friends at Providence Brewing were kind enough to invite us back. If you make the trip for their watch party, you'll notice some new wall art installation that Tide Talk is a part of. So it's pretty cool to see. So if you don't have any plans for Saturday night, it's PBD Fest in the city. It's going to be packed. Swing by the Farm Fresh building, drop into Providence Brewing, and come join our live show. The match starts at 7. Our live show is going to start at 6:30. So Mike, you'll have to tune in from your tailgate too and see what see what we talk about on there as well. But we'll do a preview episode where we break down, talk a little bit stats, little half an hour show, and then we'll go live. We'll join Providence Brewing for their weekly watch party to watch the rest of the match. So very excited to be back home at Providence Brewing for this one. So for all of our listeners, if you haven't gone out there yet, make sure you do it. We've only got a few left this season. We just love the partnership we've had with them and how accepting and open they've been with us. And we've got something really cool kind of lined up for one of the last away games. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. But I love doing that live show. So we'll hop to the chat, and then I'll start with Ryan. So I'll give him time to prep. But Kevin's got a 2-1 RIFC win. We've got Matt Hands with a 1-0 RIFC win. William Lamb, who is a Sac Republic content creator who always joins us. So, William, always good to see you on here. He's got a 2-1 RIFC win. Coach Almeida has got a 1-0 RIFC win. Nate's kind of taking the bitch way out and calling just Draw Kings. He's calling it a tie. He's not putting a number on it, but the Draw Kings title would be tied here. So I do appreciate the comment there. Our friend Evan Megatron's got a 1-0 in a sloppy match. I'm not going to read the rest because Evan rambles. Tyler's got a 0-0 draw. And we've got a, Ewan's got a 1-0 RFC. Rhode Island won't be able to play as expansive, and the Riverhounds press led by E.J. Johnson is going to cause RIFC difficulties while trying to establish a rhythm. Quality will prevail. So a lot of close games in the chat, at least on as far as that. Ryan, what do you got for your score prediction?
Ooh, so I did give one on the other podcast, so I'm hoping I'm consistent here. So I was debating between 0-0 and 1-0 to RIFC. I am going to stick to 1-0. As I said in the other one, Pittsburgh is a very, very tough nut to crack, and it makes me incredibly nervous on that front. However, I do think if Rhode Island FC can win the long ball battle, which I think having Hogan out will very much help with. He's a stellar center back. We're going to talk more about him at the live show on Saturday, but like extremely good both in the duel but also in the air. I think he would have given us a lot of problems. But I do think that Rhode Island FC, especially if they can get an early goal in this one and not keep it super tight like they did against the match this last Saturday, I think that'll be key. I could see Jack Paniotu being very important in this one to try to really unlock a very difficult team. I think we're going to have a lot more of the ball. I think it's going to be on us to make that happen, which I know we haven't been amazing at this season, but I think we can squeak out one to bring the 3 points back to Rhode Island.
Santiago's got us a 2-1 lead as well. Thank you for joining us in the chat. And, there's been a lot of debate of me reading Ewan stats, not Evans. And Ewan says, oh, come on, I'm way less entertaining. So always appreciate the good banter. I want to give mine before I kick it to Mike. I've got a 1-1 draw. And I don't think that's a horrible result. So I know people are going to jump on me in the chat as normal on this one. But not losing this game is is a very good result. I think a draw, picking up 1 point, Ryan puts get me. Yeah. Getting that 1 point on the road in a playoff 6-pointer is totally fine. I'd love to see the Tide win, obviously, but I do think that this one's going to be tough. I said on the Mon Goals pod that I think it's a set piece or a penalty that, for each team that could, whether you get it, whether you don't, and that could be the difference. But I see maybe each team having one of those opportunities. So I'm going 1-1, not an end-all, be-all, not the result we would hope for as far as, getting closer to a home playoff spot, but also not bringing Pittsburgh level on points with us. Pittsburgh's in a very hot form right now of just not losing games. I know, Mike, we talked about our draw streak, and you guys are one win and 4 draws in your last 5. So a tough nut to crack, as Ryan has kind of mentioned throughout. But I've got 1-1 for this one. How about you, Mike?
So I get to play the villain. Is that what we're saying here? After
Yeah.
seeing all the
Save that for last, right?
Yeah. No, listen, to your point, the Hounds haven't lost in 9 games. I think that I agree with everything that you said.
Hold on, Mike. We got to dispute this in the chat. So we've got they aren't hot; they are still defrosting. So I'll let you have Megatron on that one.
I've been going at him all day on this. So.
So he's in a Discord chat with us, and it's been all day long. But go ahead, feel free to tackle that with your score prediction.
Okay, here we go.
I will also say though that Ryan and I do not endorse this take.
That's fine. So no, listen. I mean, right? Your point about Hogan being out is totally legit. My counter to that is that Hogan actually missed a few games earlier this season back-to-back games, he split the back of his head open and had to get stitches, came back in the next one and split his eyebrow open and had to get stitches. And then while he was out, he had a stroke that nobody knew about, and he like came on the show and told us about. So like there was a period where we thought he was going to be gone for good, and he ended up coming back. So kudos to him. And then, basically the fact that we were in Indy, lost him 4 minutes into the game and should have still won that game 1-0. I am concerned about him not being there, but not as concerned as if this was like the first time that it happened. So I'm going to go with a 1-0 Hounds win. I think it's going to be really, really tight. My hope is that after the game last weekend, the team should have plenty of belief in themselves to go to Indy to essentially win 1-0 down a man for the entire game. And this is a case where we keep asking, there's a guy, Justin, who's on our show. Is this a must-win game? And his whole thing is like, technically it is not a must-win game, but we're finally at the point where he has admitted this is a have-to-win game, because the Hounds are in a position where we have to win our home games if we want to have any hope of
I would also add and argue that it's more of a must-win or more of a have-to-win for you than it is for us.
Yes. 1,000%. So you guys are sitting in a really favorable position at this point. We're in a spot where we know we've got to pick up points. And I think that the fans are going to be behind the team, especially after the performance last week, to sort of applaud them and try to encourage them to get forward. And we also know the guys do get up for home games. We talk to them and we hear all about it. So it's going to be a great game to watch regardless of the outcome, for sure.
So, Mike, are you nervous that maybe with all this excitement, the team might hold on to the ball a little too much?
get above that 47% that I told you.
You dropped a very interesting
if you could share that
line on your pod, so share that with our listeners as well.
So we had been joking for a while that like, if we have more than a certain percentage, then like we're gonna have to lose. That's just what happens. So literally last week I went back through all of our games and I looked at our possession numbers, and it was funny because when I ranked them based on the amount of possessions that we had, there was a very clear line that I think the number was 47%. If we have more than 47% of the ball, we have not won a single game this year with more than 47% of the ball. It's either been a loss or a draw. All of our wins have come whenever we've had less than 47%. And anytime we've had 47% or less, we only lost one game in that stretch, and that was the first game of the season. So every other game where we had 47% or less, we've either won or drawn. So, yeah, we don't want the ball. If you guys want to take it and run, that's fine. We'll figure out something else to do with it later.
We'll see who will end up with it at the end of it and whose style prevails. It seems like it's going to be a stylistic battle, and, that who can impose their will a little bit more. But definitely appreciate you taking the time out to join us, Mike. Before we do sign off, I'll kick it to you first, Ryan. Any final thoughts you have before we head out of here?
No, super excited to see everybody at Providence Brewing this Saturday. Again, live show starts promptly at 6:30, so please join us. If you can't make it in person, we will be streaming it live right here, so get in the chat. We always love that. Also have to shout out Andrew Quadros, wrote a great blog, published it a little bit, like an hour or two ago, doing his monthly, what is it? The Tide chart. Sorry, Andrew. Where he ranks kind of who rose, who fell this month, which is great. I think it's a little controversial. Kind of hate the stock falling section, but we'll get over that. So yeah, definitely check out TideTalkerI.com there, and hope to see you all Saturday.
Very good. Nate says style makes fights. So we're in for a fight on Saturday, I think, regardless. I do like that take. If this was in our post-match, we usually pick one of the 3 Road reviews as our episode title. I think that would have been the episode title for tonight. I like that a lot. Yeah, very well. The weigh-in just kind of does its own thing too, though. But Megatron's going to be at the brewery, Ryan. So Matt Hands, you might want to stay away. Nate says, great show, guys. Ewan says, RIFC. So very excited to have everyone in there. Mike, thanks again for joining. Any final thoughts you got for us before we sign off on this one?
No, listen, I just thank you guys for doing what you do. This is always fun talking to you guys. I appreciate you guys being on our show. I appreciate coming on and talking to you guys. It's just always so much fun. And hopefully, we can all enjoy the game regardless of the outcome this weekend.
Awesome. I'm super excited to be sitting back in our corner, I'm going to call it, at Providence Brewing now that we have that art installation. So if you've never been to a Tide Talk live show, this Saturday is definitely the day to do it and the day to check it out. like I said, it's PVD Fest, so go out, check out the city beforehand, and come join us for a few beers and watch the match. Like I posted on my Instagram story, join us for the mediocre soccer takes, and stay for the great beer and for the watch party. That's I guess the best we can offer you for this one.
Yeah,
but,
don't overpromise. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we might have another special code for you, Club Collector Junkies, so just be on the lookout for that one as well. But that'll about wrap things up for this one. Remember, Tide Talk is more than just a podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for daily social media content. Click that link in this episode description to follow all of our accounts. I've been your host, Matt, for my good friend Ryan and Mike from the Mon Goals podcast covering the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time, and hopefully we'll see you at Providence Brewing on Saturday. If not, we'll catch you in the live stream and in the comments. But thanks again for joining, and as always, up the tide.
Up the Tide.